3 weeks ago, a notary showed up at my grandmother's house to help my uncle sign away her power of attorney. Except the notary wasn't a notary, and my grandmother, who the whole family believed was slipping into dementia, wasn't confused. She hasn't been confused for a single day in her life. But I'm getting ahead of myself, and Grandma would tell me a good record starts at the beginning. I'm a 35-year-old IT systems administrator, married, 1 kid, boring job keeping servers alive for a company you've never heard of. I'm posting this on a throwaway because half my family is on Reddit and the other half is currently not speaking to me, which, after you read this, you'll understand is the best thing that's ever happened to my weekends. This story is about my grandma Eleanor, who is 81, and my uncle Rick, who is 54, and the $94,617 that went missing between them. Some background, because it matters. Grandma Eleanor worked as a court stenographer for 34 years. If you've never met a court stenographer, understand. These are people who can type 260 words a minute while a defense attorney and a prosecutor scream over each other and get every word right, with punctuation. Grandma's brain is a filing cabinet with a deadbolt. When I was a kid, she would settle arguments between cousins by reciting, verbatim, what each of us had said 20 minutes earlier, including our tone. We called it getting read back. You did not want to get read back. She's also famous in our family for 2 things. First, her Christmas checks. Every grandkid and great-grandkid gets a card in her perfect Palmer method penmanship, the kind of handwriting they stopped teaching before I was born, with a check inside. Not huge. $100 when I was young, more lately. It's not about the money. It's that the card always has one specific sentence about your year in it. She notices everything, and the card proves it. Second, her recipe box. A dented green tin box from probably 1970, stuffed with index cards. Her strawberry rhubarb pie card is in there. Rick has loudly hated that pie since childhood tastes like sweet celery, which is honestly the most important detail in this whole story, but you don't know that yet. Neither did I. Okay. Uncle Rick. Rick is my mom's younger brother, and he has been between opportunities since approximately 1998. Every family has one. The failed vending machine route, the crypto phase, the lawsuit against a former employer that was always about to settle. He's charming at parties, remembers everyone's team, hugs like he means it. He has also borrowed money from literally every adult in this family, including, I found out later, my wife, who lent him $500 in 2019 and was too embarrassed to tell me. 2 years ago, Grandpa had been gone for a decade, Grandma's knees were getting bad, and Rick's latest apartment situation fell through. At Thanksgiving, he announced, like a press conference, that he was moving in with Grandma as her live-in caretaker. Somebody has to step up, he said, looking around the table. I guess it's going to be me. The family basically gave him a standing ovation. My mom cried. My aunt called him a saint. And I want to be honest here, because this sub values honesty. I clapped too. I remember thinking, good, someone will be there if she falls. That's my flaw in this story, or the first one. I saw the setup happening in real time, and I applauded it. The first year was quiet. Rick posted pictures of Grandma's garden with captions like my full-time job now. Fine. The red flags started small, the way they do. Flag 1, the landline. Grandma has had the same phone number for 1 years. Around 14 months ago, calls to it started going straight to a busy signal. When I asked, Rick said the line was corroded, they don't even service copper anymore, and that it was easier to just call his cell and he'd put her on. Every call to my grandmother now went through Rick. Sometimes she was napping. Grandma has never napped in her life. The woman irons at 6 a.m. Flag 2. Visits got weird. You couldn't just drop by anymore. Rick wanted a heads up so she's at her best. Twice I came by unannounced with my daughter, and both times Rick met us in the driveway pleasant, chatty, blocking the door with his body the way a bar bouncer is pleasant. She's having a rough day, buddy. Her memory, you know. The second time, I saw the kitchen curtain move behind him. I told myself it was the cat. Flag 3, and this is the one that actually scared people. Last Christmas, no cards, no checks. First time in the history of the family. When my cousin asked, Rick did this sad sigh he'd been perfecting and said, she doesn't really track dates anymore. I didn't want to embarrass her by making her try. Everyone nodded along, heartbroken. My mom squeezed his shoulder, and I sat there with this splinter in my brain, because 2 months before that, at my daughter's birthday party, one of the last times I'd seen Grandma without Rick orbiting her, she had leaned over to my daughter and said, "7 is a big year. 7 is when your daddy broke his arm showing off on the Henderson's trampoline June 14th, a Saturday. He cried harder about the popsicle he dropped than the arm. That is not a woman who doesn't track dates. That is a woman with a filing cabinet and a deadbolt. So I did the reasonable things first, because I wanted on record that I tried the reasonable things. I suggested to my mom that Grandma see her doctor for a real cognitive evaluation. Rick said he'd already handled it and the doctor said it was normal aging. Nobody asked which doctor. I offered to set Grandma up with a simple cell phone, big buttons, my treat. Rick laughed and told the whole Easter table, "That's our IT guy, thinks every problem needs a gadget. She can't work the microwave, bud." Everyone chuckled. Grandma, across the table, peeled an orange in one long, unbroken spiral and said nothing. I now know she was listening to every word at 260 per minute. I asked my mom, Rick's sister, the designated keeper of the peace, whether anyone was, looking at Grandma's finances, just as a safety thing. My mom got that pinched look and said the sentence that enabled this entire disaster. Rick gave up his whole life to take care of her. Please don't start something. He gave up his whole life. His whole life was a futon and a lawsuit that was about to settle. So I dropped it. For months. I'm not proud of that. Then came the spring family reunion barbecue, first weekend of May, at my aunt's place. Rick brought Grandma like he was presenting her hand on her elbow, narrating her to people. "She's having a good day today, aren't you, Mom?" Grandma smiled this small, polite smile I didn't recognize, and let herself be steered, and something about watching her be steered made my chest hurt. Late afternoon, I was at the drinks cooler, and suddenly she was just there beside me, alone for the first time all day. She hugged me, a real one, and while her arms were around my neck, I felt her hand slide something into my jacket pocket, flat and folded. Then she pulled back, patted my cheek, and said, at completely normal volume, "I made you a grocery list, sweetheart. Don't lose it. Your grandfather always lost my lists." Rick materialized about 9 seconds later. "There she is. Mom, you can't wander off on me," and steered her away. I didn't look at the list until I was in my car. I want to describe this exactly, because I've now read this piece of paper about 400 times, and I'll be able to recite it when I'm 81 myself. It was a page from her little kitchen notepad, the one with the strawberries on the border. At the top, in that perfect Palmer penmanship, milk, eggs, flour camouflage, in case anyone glanced at it. And below that, in tight, dense, dead straight lines, act ending 4,000, 417 3/9 $1,900 plumber. No plumber came. Act ending 4,000, 417, 3/23, $2,400, cash W, D, Ridgeline Branch, 2:14 p.m. I was in the car. CD closed 1/17, $31,000 I did not authorize. 19 months of this. Started at $200. It is $94,617 as of April 30. And at the bottom, underlined once, "He thinks I don't notice. Help me catch him properly. Tell no one loud." I sat in my car in my aunt's driveway holding a grocery list with a forensic accounting summary on it and the phrase "tell no one loud." And I'm not ashamed to say my hands were shaking. Partly fear, partly, and this took me a while to identify, partly this rising, ferocious joy. Because everyone had been mourning my grandmother's mind for a year while it was sitting there behind the curtain, taking dictation. I drove back to my own house on autopilot. I almost took out a mailbox. And at 11:30 that night, my phone rang from a number I didn't know, and a familiar voice said, quiet and crisp, "It's the neighbor's phone. Marjorie walks at 7, so I borrow the kitchen. You have questions. You get 4 minutes. Bring a pen next time." That was the beginning. It's currently 4 months later. Rick has drained $94,617 from my grandmother, forged her signature at least 11 times that we can prove, and impersonated her on the phone to her own bank while she napped 15 feet away. He believes she is one signature away from handing him full power of attorney, He has scheduled a notary to come to the house this Tuesday at 10 a.m. Grandma told me not to worry about the notary. She said she's scheduled something too. I asked her what. She said, "Sweetheart, I sat in courtrooms for 34 years. I know how a good hearing ends," and hung up, because Marjorie needed her phone back. It's Sunday night. I'll update after Tuesday. I honestly don't know what my 81-year-old grandmother has planned, and I helped her plan most of it. Update 1. Okay. Wow. I did not expect the original post to get that kind of attention, and I can't answer everyone, but a few common questions before I get to what happened in the 4 months between the grocery list and this week, because you need the middle part for Tuesday to make sense. A couple of you guessed pieces of it. Nobody guessed the recipe box. First, to everyone asking, why didn't you just call Adult Protective Services immediately? I wanted to. The night of the barbecue, that was my whole plan. On our second phone call Tuesdays and Fridays, 7:05 a.m., Marjorie's kitchen, 4 minutes I told Grandma I was calling APS in the morning. There was a pause, and then she gave me the readback. Verbatim, my own words from 30 seconds earlier, in my own rhythm. Then she said, "And when the nice investigator interviews a sweet old woman whose son says she's confused, and the woman's own family lines up to swear he's a saint who gave up everything, who do you think the file believes? No. We do not go to them with a worry. We go to them with a record. You build me the record, and I will tell you exactly what a record needs, because I spent 34 years making them. And we tell no one loud, because your mother," another pause, "softer your mother loves her brother. The way you love a stove, you know, is broken. She will warn him without meaning to. We protect her from that. Do you understand?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, you would have too." So here's what the record needed, per the retired court stenographer. 1. Independent documentation of the money. I couldn't touch her accounts that had to be clean, so Grandma did it herself, in plain sight. Every week, Rick drove her to her errands, and one of her errands was the bank, where Rick would walk her to the counter and hover. What Rick didn't know is that Grandma had quietly asked her favorite teller, a woman named Dolores. She's known for 20 years to print her statements for my scrapbooking and tuck them inside the AARP magazine. Carried. The statements came home inside the magazine, and the magazine went in the recycling, and the statements went into the green recipe box, folded inside the card for strawberry rhubarb pie. The one pie Rick has loudly hated for 50 years. She chose that card on purpose. He's opened that box 100 times looking for the peach cobbler, she told me. A man only searches where his appetite tells him to. I need everyone to sit with that sentence the way I did. 2. The impersonation calls. Grandma knew Rick was calling her bank, pretending to be her. She'd heard him through the wall doing her voice, which she described as a hate crime against my vowels, but her word wasn't evidence. So this is where the IT guy finally got to be useful. I bought a digital photo frame, the kind that cycles family pictures, with a motion-activated camera and a memory card. I loaded it with 300 photos of the family heavy on Rick, because vanity is a security vulnerability, and Grandma gave it to him as a gift. I want you to have our memories in the kitchen, Ricky. He put it exactly where she suggested, on the counter by the phone charger, angled exactly the way she'd rehearsed with me. My grandmother social engineered the camera placement. I just paid for shipping. Over 4 months, that frame captured Rick on 11 separate calls, at the kitchen counter, doing my grandmother's voice to her bank's phone line, reading her social security number off a sticky note, confirming transfers, once literally saying, "Oh, honey, I don't get around like I used to. My son handles all that. Add him to the account, would you?" in a falsetto that will haunt me until I die. In 3 of those videos, you can see, in the background, through the doorway, my grandmother napping in her chair, facing the kitchen, with her eyes closed and her hands folded like a woman at peace. She was counting reference numbers. I'll get to that. 3. The forgeries. Rick had started pushing papers at her insurance stuff. Mom, just initial here. Grandma signed every single thing he put in front of her, cheerfully, because before she signed, she'd say, "Let me get my good glasses, Ricky," and take the papers to her bedroom, where she photographed every page with the $60 phone I'd taped under her nightstand drawer, then signed with a tiny, deliberate flaw. She drops the crossbar on her capital E, so any document could be dated against her real signature. My grandmother built a signature canary. Her attorney later said he'd seen federal witnesses with worse tradecraft. Oh, right. The attorney. Item 4. In month 2, Grandma had me drive her during Rick's fantasy football draft, the one day a year he's reliably unavailable for 4 hours to her estate attorney of 40 years, a man named Walt, who is 74 and semi-retired, and who, when Grandma laid the recipe box ledger on his desk, put on his glasses, read for 10 minutes and said, "Eleanor, I've missed you." Walt quietly verified what we suspected the endgame was. Rick had called Walt's office twice, fishing, asking what it would take to update Mom's power of attorney, her memories going, sad situation. Walt, who has known Grandma since Nixon, had strung him along beautifully. Rick, getting nowhere with Walt, found himself a mobile notary online instead, for a fresh POA he'd had drafted by some online service, granting himself everything. And this is where I have to confess the part I'm not proud of, because you guys can smell a sanitized story. Somewhere in month 3, I started enjoying it. Like, too much. I was running a 2-person surveillance op with an octogenarian, and I was alive. I got short with my wife because I was up at midnight indexing footage. I missed my daughter's soccer game for a grandma errand that could have waited. My wife finally sat me down and said, "You're allowed to save your grandmother. You're not allowed to disappear into it." She was right, and she is also the only other person on earth who knew, because I lie badly, and Grandma approved the disclosure. "Wives find out," she said. Better on purpose. The 4 months weren't smooth either. 2 near disasters. Near disaster 1. In July, Rick unplugged the photo frame for 6 days because it was using up an outlet. Grandma got it plugged back in by telling him she cried when the pictures went dark. He restored it within the hour, and she called me from Marjorie's kitchen and said, I should have gone to Hollywood, with 0 remorse. Near disaster 2, and this one still makes my stomach drop. In August, Rick caught me. I'd come by with groceries as cover to swap the camera's memory card, and he came home early and walked into the kitchen while the frame was in my hands, 10 feet away, card half out, and Grandma, without missing a beat, from her chair said, in a wavering little voice I'd never heard her use, "Is that you, Harold? Harold is my grandfather, dead 10 years. Rick's whole face rearranged into performative grief. He rushed to her, held her hand, murmured about how she's been doing this more and more while behind his back I reseated the card, set the frame down, and stood there sweating through my shirt. She winked at me over his shoulder. Winked. This woman played the dementia card as a diversion in real time, and winked. Rick then used "she thought I was dad at 2 family dinners" for sympathy. My mother cried both times. That was the closest I came to blowing everything, watching him harvest tears from a performance my grandmother had put on to save my operation. Grandma talked me down on the Friday call. Let him spend that story, sweetheart. Every lie he tells now is one he answers for later. We are building the later. By the end of September, we had 19 months of bank statements. Her handwritten parallel ledger started at the first $200 discrepancy, a pharmacy charge from a town she hasn't visited since 2019. 11 videos of voice impersonation with dates and, thanks to her naps, Grandma's handwritten log of every reference number the bank agents read aloud, photographs of every document he'd had her sign, and Walt's file memo on Rick's POA phishing calls. Total confirmed, 94 673. Then, 2 weeks ago, the photo frame caught the money shot. Rick at the counter, on the phone with the mobile notary service, scheduling the signing. Tuesday the 14th, 10 a.m. Yeah, she has good mornings. It'll be quick. She signs whatever I... And then he laughed. This easy little laugh. She signs whatever I tell her, honestly. Bring your stamp. I drove the footage to Walt that afternoon. Walt watched it twice, took off his glasses, and said, "Well, let's give the man his Tuesday." I asked what that meant. Walt looked at me like I was the slow one in the class and said, "Son, your grandmother scheduled her own appointment 3 weeks ago. Didn't she tell you?" She had not told me. Tell no one loud apparently includes me, on a need-to-know basis, in my own sting. It's Monday night now. Tuesday is tomorrow. Grandma's last words on our call this morning were, and I quote, "Wear a collared shirt. There will be professionals present. I'll update when it's over. My heart rate is 96, and I'm sitting perfectly still. Update 2. It's done. I've started this update 4 times because my hands are still doing a thing. I'm just going to write it in order, the way she would want. A good record starts at the beginning. Tuesday, 9:40 a.m. Per Grandma's instructions, I arrived unexpectedly with donuts. My assigned role was oblivious grandson, natural, deniable. Rick was annoyed to see me. He was wearing a blazer. He'd cleaned the kitchen. There was a folder on the table, squared to the table edge, and a pen laid out. He kept touching the folder like it was warm. Grandma was in her chair by the window in her Sunday cardigan, hands folded, doing the polite, vacant smile. She accepted a donut. She called me by my father's name, for Rick's benefit. Rick mouthed rough morning at me and tapped his temple. I ate a donut and hated him with a purity I have never felt about anything. 10 a.m. Exactly. The doorbell. Rick straightened his blazer and opened the door to a woman in a gray suit with a leather bag, and a man behind her in a windbreaker, and behind him, visible over his shoulder, parked across the street, a county sheriff's cruiser that had not been there when I arrived. "Richard?" the woman said pleasantly. "You scheduled a signing for 10? Yes, come in. My mother's expecting." "I'm glad to hear that," the woman said, stepping in and opening a badge wallet. "Because so are we. Karen Whitfield, Adult Protective Services, Financial Exploitation Unit. This is Deputy Alvarez. We received a report and a records package concerning this address." And then, past Rick's frozen shoulder, to my grandmother, warmly, like they'd spoken before. Because they had, "Good morning, Mrs. E. You said 10 worked best?" And my grandmother stood up out of that chair like the chair had been a costume. The cardigan came off the shoulders. The vacant smile left. 50 years of courtroom posture arrived, and Grandma Eleanor said, in the clearest voice in the room, "Good morning, Karen." "Yes, he's punctual when money's involved. Shall we begin? I'd like my attorney present. Walt, come in from the porch. You'll catch cold." Walt had been on the porch. Walt had been on the porch the entire time, doing the crossword. I wish I had the vocabulary to describe Rick's face across the next several minutes. The closest I can get. Have you ever watched a video buffer, stall, and then just fail to load? He looked at Grandma, at the badge, at Walt unfolding himself through the front door with a briefcase, at me, and I watched him try, version after version. There's been a misunderstanding. She's confused. She gets like this. "I don't know what my nephew told you. He's had it out for me." And that's when it happened. The thing I will be telling people at my own 81st birthday party. Investigator Whitfield asked Grandma, gently, the standard opening question whether she was aware of any irregular activity in her accounts. My grandmother said, "I am. Would you like the summary or the full record?" Whitfield said the full record would be wonderful. And Grandma Eleanor, 81, retired court stenographer, sat down at her own kitchen table, folded her hands, closed her eyes, and recited, at dictation speed, for 19 minutes. Every withdrawal, every date, every falsified plumber and pharmacy. The CD closed on January 17th. He initiated that call at 11:52 a.m. I was told it was a survey. 11 phone calls where a man impersonated her voice, and for each one, the date, the approximate time, and the reference number the bank agent had read aloud, which she had memorized from her chair, napping, 15 feet away, and logged in the recipe box afterward. She cited the first discrepancy, $200, March of last year, Hartfield Pharmacy, a town I have not entered since 2019, which is when they closed the Woolworths. She cited the sticky note with her social security number currently affixed to the inside of the cabinet above the coffee maker, his handwriting, "You may photograph it." Deputy Alvarez went and photographed it. At some point, Whitfield stopped taking notes and just watched her, the way you'd watch weather. When Grandma finished, she opened her eyes and said, "There is corroboration for every line item. My grandson will provide the video files. He's been very patient with an old woman's shopping lists, and the documentary record is in my recipe box, inside the strawberry rhubarb card." She looked at Rick for the first time, and her voice didn't rise even 1 degree. He wouldn't have found it in 50 years. He never once looked past his own appetite. Rick had gone a color I've only seen on drywall. He made his last play, the one I'd been dreading, the one aimed at the family jury that wasn't even in the room. Mom. After everything I've done for you, and Grandma gave him the read back. She signs whatever I tell her, honestly. Bring your stamp, she recited. Thursday before last, 2:40, 1 inches the afternoon at that counter, on the phone with the notary service. Would you like me to continue, Ricky? I have 19 months of you. I kept every word. He sat down, not in a chair. He just sort of found the wall and slid down it a few inches and stopped pretending to stand up straight. And for 1 second, I'll be honest about this too, 1 second, watching my uncle understand that the confused old woman had been the smartest person in every room for 2 years, I felt something that was 90% justice and 10% something colder, and I'm still deciding how I feel about the 10%. The folder on the table, his fresh power of attorney, drafted online, with a signature page went into an evidence sleeve. Whitfield's people had already pulled the 11 forged signature documents from our package. Walt walked her through the dropped crossbar on the capital E, document by document, dated against 50 years of Grandma's real signature on file at her own bank. Exhibit A, Whitfield said, holding up the POA draft, and I swear Grandma nodded the way conductors nod. Deputy Alvarez read Rick his rights at 11:15 a.m. in the kitchen he'd lived in for free for 2 years, next to a digital photo frame that was, at that exact moment, cycling to a photo of him grinning at last year's 4th of July. You cannot write that. God writes that. And then this is the part that broke me while they were walking Rick out. Grandma touched Whitfield's sleeve and said, before everyone with a badge leaves, Walt has my new will and a trust instrument ready. I'd like to sign them this afternoon. Here, properly witnessed. While we have witnesses. She smiled, and for a second the polite vacant mask flickered back on deliberately, like a magician showing you the trick. At my age, dear, you never know when your memory will go. The deputy stayed for the signing. The Christmas checks are now a trust. Rick's name appears in it exactly once, in a clause Walt drafted that I'm told is legally airtight and personally devastating. And no, I'm not sharing it yet. Final update soon, there's fallout. My mother, and one more thing Grandma did that none of us saw coming, including Walt. Final update. It's been 5 weeks. Here's the rest of the record. Rick, charged with financial exploitation of an elder, 11 counts of forgery, and identity theft. Between the ledger, the statements, the videos, the reference numbers, and the sticky note above the coffee maker, his public defender took one long look at the file and started talking plea. He took it. Restitution of the full $94,617. They're seizing what's left, garnishing the rest for what Walt estimates is the remainder of Rick's natural life. A felony record, 5 years probation, and a no-contact order with Grandma that Rick himself, per his attorney, did not contest. He also, it turns out, owed $38,000 to 2 credit cards and a business partner from the crypto phase, which is where a chunk of Grandma's money actually went. He wasn't building a nest egg. He was bailing out a sinking boat with her bucket. My mother. This was the part I dreaded more than Tuesday. When it broke, she called me sobbing, and the first thing she said, I'm not proud of how angry this made me, was, how could you do this to your uncle? Not is Grandma okay? I started to argue, and Grandma, who was sitting in my kitchen at the time, held out her hand for the phone like a woman requesting a document. She didn't lecture. She played one video. The falsetto, "Oh honey, my son handles all that." 40 seconds. Then she said, Susan, you called your son a troublemaker at Easter for offering me a telephone. Ricky called me a goldmine with a pulse on March 9th, 4:22 p.m., to someone named Donnie. You may have a week to be sad about your brother. I had 19 months. I'll expect you Sunday. Bring nothing. And hung up. My mom showed up Sunday. She cried at the kitchen table for an hour, and Grandma let her, and then put her to work rolling pie crust, and something in my family that had been bent for 40 years, the keep the peace reflex, the Rick-shaped blind spot, got set straight at that table, not gently, but properly. My mom now calls Grandma every day at 7:05 a.m. on the landline, which was never broken, by the way. Rick had unplugged it at the wall box outside. Grandma knew. She left it unplugged. It made him feel clever, she said. Clever men stop checking whether they're being watched. I think about that sentence at work now, professionally. The family group chat did explode, in stages. The arrest, chaos, the plea, silence. And then Grandma's response to a second cousin who posted a long thing about forgiveness and not airing family business. Grandma, who we did not know had figured out group texts, replied, "The business was aired when he spent it." Screenshot is framed in 3 separate households now. The thing nobody saw coming, including Walt. At the will signing, Grandma added a provision she'd drafted herself, in Palmer, method longhand. It's a scholarship-style fund, from her estate, but not for college. It pays for financial literacy and elder fraud training for bank tellers at the local credit union, in perpetuity, administered by the branch. Named the Dolores Fund, after her teller of 20 years, the woman who smuggled statements inside an AARP magazine because an old customer asked her to trust her. Dolores found out at the branch when the paperwork arrived and had to sit down in the vault. Grandma's note on the provision, verbatim, because of course I kept it verbatim, she raised me right. Every catch begins with one person who believes the old woman. Rick's clause in the will, which I promised, he isn't disinherited, that's the genius of it. He inherits, quote, the full balance of what he preserved for me, my strawberry rhubarb pie recipe, the original card, in recognition of where he never thought to look. That card, the one that guarded the ledger for 19 months, is the sum total of his inheritance, and the will requires it be delivered to him with a photocopy of what it contained. Walt says it's the finest thing he's witnessed in 49 years of practice. Grandma says, he always said it tastes like sweet celery. Now it can taste like $94,617. Grandma, she's fine. She's better than fine, she's free. She has her house, her rebuilt accounts, a medical alert setup she pretends to hate, and a rotation of family who visit because the door is finally just open. Last Sunday I came by unannounced, on purpose, because I can now, and found her at the kitchen table teaching my daughter, age 7, big year, how to write a capital E in Palmer method, with the crossbar slightly dropped. Every lady needs a signature, Grandma told her, and every signature needs a secret. Christmas is in 6 weeks. The checks are back, through the trust, and Grandma says this year every card sentence is already written, because I had a very well-documented year. Mine is sealed on her counter. I'm honestly a little scared of it. So, that's the record. My uncle stole $94,617 from a woman he thought was fading, and she caught every dollar of it in real time, recruited me with a grocery list, ran the sting from a rocking chair, and read him into a felony plea at dictation speed. The family's split, about 80/20. Most people are in awe of her, but there's a stubborn few who think we humiliated a struggling man and that it should have been handled privately, within the family. So, Reddit, was there any version of this that should have stayed within the family? Would you have gone to APS on day 1 instead of building the record for 4 months? And be honest, is anyone else's grandmother secretly the most dangerous person in the family? Or is it just mine?